Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about Suspiria from 1977. So, firstly, I would go on and also tell you that Suspiria had also had a remake in 2018 that I feel that I'm going on and stating something that might ruin this review, but I want to build trust, and then also I want to let people know that hey, like people are also interested in this as well. Like I'll probably go and check this out. So the remake of this movie I caught a clip of after watching this film, and I was like, wow, like my mind is just kind of blown with this one scene, because this one clip we have this girl who's going on and just kind of waffingly just kind of dancing and doing all of this stuff, and she's doing that in one room, and then all of a sudden we have another girl in another room who's popping and locking, and I'm not stating dancing, like she's really just doing some bone crunching freaking uh snap crackle pop, and freaking like she is losing fluids, and I'm not talking about blood. Like this girl is just every goddamn thing, and I am just like, wow, that clearly is a car crash that you can't look away from. But then again, I am just like, man, like these movies, both of them are just kind of really interesting in their own merits. So let's go on and talk about this movie. So this film has a couple of different flavors of horror, and let me go on and explain that. So, firstly, we would have what I would like to call location horror. When you go into a place and then all of a sudden the door locks behind you and you're just like, oh no, I can't leave. Like, hopefully, this won't go on and make me rethink my life choices or probably die. And sure enough, it probably will, unless you're Final Girl and then you just have either plot armor or you are just to be like, hey man, like, even with all the seemingly red flags that I'm going on and getting here, like I'm still like finish lining this mother up. Because I'll go on and I'll talk about some of those red flags when I start to break down this film. When we kind of get to the tee up section of this movie. So the other kind of flavors of horror that we're getting here, like to me, there is also a slasher kind of element to this film. And I was like, okay, all right, like we're getting some really interesting visuals that are just kind of impacting this movie. But then also, like it seems that they're trying as much as possible to do something different with kills. And I would just go on and just kind of applaud them for that. And then lastly, we would have a thing that I'm not quite sure if I'm wanting to give it up because it could give away the film in some ways. But this movie also is a deal with a thing called witchcraft that I really haven't dipped enough in. So really, it's all about figuring that out by the end of the film. And so whether it's a demon or a witch, not quite sure by the tail end of this, but like it feels uh, that people are going on worshiping a thing that I'm just kind of like, okay, what exactly is this? But so, because they really don't hit me with clear visuals, and then also I think the remake also kind of states something as well. But so now let's go on and let's start to tee up this film. So we have a girl named Susie who goes from New York to Europe. Big mistake. So much travel to then go to a place that she is going to be traumatized for probably the rest of her life, just kind of fearing anything that is just to go on in her life to be like, oh, is it them? Like, are they back? She's gonna be looking over her shoulder for the rest of her life because of this. But so here's the thing about this film. This movie delivers so many red flags that this girl just keeps jumping over. But then again, like, they really, I feel, don't give her enough hurdles. like like towards the later part of this film, I feel, because man, that final boss. But so, like, is almost trying to set this up as some kind of video game, but it's not exactly that way. So here's where we go here. So we have this girl who is probably jet lagged as F to make her way from New York to Europe. Once she gets to the school, first red flag is that they're like, oh yeah, we've never heard of you, go away, go away. And so this girl could have easily just been like, well, I guess they don't want me here. Like, I've also to have been led to have believed I should be expected, but maybe I'm wrong. So that could have been like credits roll, movie done. No. This girl the following day goes on to make it to this school, and red flag occurs yet again. She comes to find out that one of her other acquaintances, like student and or person, is to have been murdered. And the girl's like, yeah, I'm just gonna like go on and go into this ballet school. It's a ballet school. I'm sure everybody's like, oh my god, I'm so jazzed about this. I get it. But also, like, this movie's delivering so many interesting things that I haven't gone on and done much on this channel, that again, I'm like, oh my god, this movie is freaking artsy. It has dance in it. Wow, like, all right, like something that like is reaching me just in a fascination like way. I'm just like, man, I haven't done this kind of thing. But so, because that's what I just like to. I just like to find movies that are just so like I haven't gone on and tried this before. Like, let's try these shoes on kind of thing. So, but this girl, freaking dead person right out of the gate of her like first day, and she's still just like, yeah, I want to just go on and like I just want to just be at this school and just kind of meet these people. But it seems that they're trying as much as possible to just be nice, and they're also trying to take money from me, and but then will also like give me a room to stay for absolutely free. And I'm just like, no, like, how about I go on and just kind of get away from the school and pay $50 for this room, because more than likely that would have actually been the better idea. But so here's the thing. This girl goes on, does her first class, ends up getting sick, and all of a sudden, like, once she kind of is to kind of gain her her uh her consciousness, or gain her faculties to her. That's what I was trying to say. All of a sudden, like, she comes to find out that like her roomie that she was with at that other place had just dropped off all of her stuff here at this school, and I would have just been like, mother, like, really, like, you're going on and just like taking all my personal and just dumping it off here. But then the more all the reason for you to just go on and just stay here, because you are going to have to just stay here so we can ruin your life anyways. So that's what she just goes on and does. She's like, okay, I'll just stay here. No red flag in her brain. But then all of a sudden, we then turn around and have a whole ordeal for a whole entire floor of people that forces them all to share an entire room of all these students together in one room, where they're having to sleep next to one another. And again, no red flag there for this girl. Just like, you know what, how about I just go on and figure out a way to just kind of get a hotel, because like, man, I had kind of a room before and that was taken away from me. Now I go into this school, and like, my room in this school is taken away from me. And like now I'm gonna have to go on and listen to like 10 to 20 people just go on and just snore in one room, and just how am I gonna freaking sleep through that? But then on top of that, like Susie is having this girl just consistently just waking her up. Just like, hey man, I want to tell you about all these stories and these clues, and like, let's Scooby Doo this, mother. And Susie is just like, man, I'm freaking tired. Like, I don't want to hear your like. But then again, also Susie is like, yeah, like, why are all these people just consistently just like going on and just walking through this school all the time? And like it seems like they're like not exiting anywhere, they're just consistently just walking through this school. Where are they going freaking like all the time? And how is it that I can just hear them all the time just walking around? This makes no sense. And so not only that, like the music in this freaking soundtrack would just be like, hey, could you just take that music and take it down a notch? Like, I'm like, man, like the music is just blaring in this movie. But I get it. Like, this is to be that kind of thing where they're trying to have the music just kind of build something here. But then again, I'm just like, man, like the music is just really overpowering. But so I would have just been like, hey man, like, could you put a damper on that music? So we go on to have this mystery to be afoot here. And Susie wants to go on and do the legwork and research and continue to just meet these people that are to eventually go on and tell her about witchcraft and how it seemed that the school that she had gone on to be a part at has this history of witchcraft. And again, another red flag. That she's just like, no, like, I feel like I've just kind of gone too far at this point. Like, I just can't just go on and just, like, just not continue to just see where this story just finishes up. And again, like, there is at one point where there's a guy coming after her, and she's just like, no, like, I just want to see where this is going. Oh my god, Susie. Like, I get it, you're final girl, and you're just, like, needing to finish this whole thing up, and she stumbles upon this stuff. Yeah. But, like, anybody else would have pulled the ripcord at any goddamn point. I'm deucing credits roll. But then again, anybody who had gone on and I think trying to, like, deuces credit rolled, they would go on and end up getting killed for doing so. Some points I have to pause because sounds and whatever. So trying as much as possible to do my best to give you the best quality at some points, but then again also who knows what I'll go on and say at some points. But so with that said, uh, yeah, we have a story that I want to state and reiterate that very just visually interesting, but then also has a number of things that are to just kind of make it interesting or appealing or whatever. So, what is the grading of this film? Where can you go on and see this movie? And possibly, what also am I going to go on maybe in future projects? That'll probably state exactly when this is coming out. And then also, let's go on and break this down and hopefully call this one a review. So, first of all, my grading of this movie. I want to say, because of the imagery alone, solid, okay movie at the end of the day. Really, uh, I don't care that this movie is such a slow slog of a film when there's to be within the first 10 minutes something that catches my intrigue. Just be like, okay, all right, movie, like, you've got me. Because if you don't get me in the first 10 minutes, then, like you're not going to get me at all. To where I end up either regretting a film or I want to quickly be forgetting a film. So let me go on and let me tell you where you can go on and see this film, because I have gone on and possibly stated repetitively certain apps that you can go out of your way to see movies for absolutely free. But this time around, I'm going to go on and have to selectively give you certain apps so you can go on and find the English version of said film. So, with that said, firstly, of course, within the Google search right now, there are to be two things. So, if you Google search this movie and you put in the word 1977, Suspiria, you are to go on and find that there is an app called Xumo Play, XUMO Play, and you can go on and click onto that and see this movie for absolutely free, it seemed, and watch the whole film in English. The nextly alternative that, because maybe you've gone on and just kind of heard me rant and prattle on about a number of apps upon this channel, you can go on and also find a app called HDO Box through a Google search and a APK download, and be able to find this movie in English via going on and clicking onto the film and then adjusting the server that is to be on the far right and kind of clicking through and finding out that there is a plethora of different kinds of things that all say like 1080p, 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 720p, and you can start to click through those until you get the English version of this film, and then English version of movie. Or you can watch it with subtitles if you want to just go on and do that also. Who knows? Maybe you're to be that kind of person. But, anyways, after that, let's go on and let's talk about my future project that I'm putting together upon this film of channel review specifically. I don't know. So, I was gonna go on and review the film called Terror Train, which is a Jamie Lee Curtis film. I was going to do that today, but god dang it, does it always happen to where, like, I have a movie just raring to go, and then I'm like, hey, how about I spend a little bit of time on Google for a second? And then that second ends up having me find a completely other different film, and I'm just like, oh, okay, now I have to go on and put together a thumbnail and put together uh, a background thing, and then interesting enough, sometimes when I'm to even go on and make a whole entire thumbnail, I have to remake a whole entire thumbnail because I watched the film. So it's like, dang it! This could be a more interesting visual, like, it could be more artsy visual and whatever. And then I was like, God, dang it, I'm right. But so, uh, yeah. So hopefully, you are to want to hopefully be interested in Terror Train, the original movie, with David Copperfield and all that kind of jazz, or rationally, some people may go on and also like whatever the remake is that is probably in the very cheap. And it seems that there are sequels to that. Man, that movie just must be surprisingly doing well for something I've never even heard of until today. So, With that also said, if people are really interested in also having me talk about the remake of this movie, Suspiria, let me know in the comments below. Because maybe if this video somehow does well, or it seems that maybe that other movie is probably more trending, then maybe I will give that a shot. Because at some point when I'm to go on and just kind of put other things in, I found out, oh, there might be another thing that is actually way more popular. I'm like, maybe I should check that out. Because I've eventually gone into that and realized, yeah, I probably should have done this all along, but retroactively, I was like, well, I want to check out this, and regretted it afterwards because it didn't do well. But anyways, so with that said, it's about time to break down this movie. Because logically, any other future projects are just like, well, like I have a smothering or smattering of just a bunch of stuff that I plan in the future to hopefully knock down after kind of getting to Terror Train. But then again, also, like every time I am to probably state that I'm going to definitely do something, 30 other projects get in the way, or just one every single day that is like, hey man, you talked a million years ago about this film and this review. Whatever happened to that? Or like, I don't know. I got caught up. I got caught up into other things. Um, but anyways, let's get caught up into this breakdown of this movie because I feel like I'm very not holding on or tethering and attentions and whatever. So let's go on into what is to be the usual song and dance, and then I will pause this review to go on and whip out stuff up on my phone or whatever's to be on my brain for me to say things about this film in more detail. Because it is spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. Let me go on and pause this. So I already have at some point. If you probably caught that pause, it's great. It's a good time. It's neuro solid. Let me know in the comments below if you are to have somehow either retroactively have already seen this movie and you randomly saw this review or whatever. Maybe you were to go on and just uh, watch this movie and just be like, wow, what interesting visuals or something. Or really, you could probably also state that this movie sucked and why did I pick this? Because I gotta review stuff almost every single gosh darn day, as long as I can go on and be able to talk and say words and not feel either ill or extremely tired. Then I'm here as best as I can. So, man, let's go into pausing this thing and getting out my stuff. All right. So, Susie is to go from this airport and make her way to this cab driver. Even before that even goes off, there is to also be a introduction like thing that goes on and tells us like about this character, which I thought was kind of weird. Like they didn't Star Wars crawl this mother, they just like, oh no, I'm going to narrate in the very beginning of this of the backstory of this character, of how she came to be. And I'm like, okay, like you couldn't have like had that be like some kind of phone call she could have made or something. I don't know. But anyways, so Susie is to try and wave down this cab driver. And interesting enough, the very beginning of this movie, we have like just horribly pouring down rain. And then by the very tail end of this movie, horribly pouring down rain. To where I'm like, man, like, did they like plan that? Or like, but I also was just like, wow, like that is just kind of a full circle like thing. And I liked how they just did that anyways. Or maybe it's just a weird coincidence. I probably doubt it. So maybe they just filmed at a place that just consistently rains. Anyways, so Susie then waves down this one cabbie, and she ends up asking him, like, hey, can you give me a hand with my luggage? It's pouring down rain. Do you legitimately think that this cabbie's like, oh yeah, sure, I'm just gonna get out and get all of your luggage and also catch pneumonia? No, like this guy probably does not get paid enough for that. Like, no. So the girl goes on, grabs all of her crap, and is to go into the cab and is to state where she's going. The Escharstrasse. I probably said that right? Probably not. Extrasse? Escharstrasse. Sure. And the guy is even just like, what did that reviewer just go on and say? And so the girl has to go on repeat it and then have this piece of paper stating what it says. And then it's like, Estrasse. Okay, like, I know where that place is. So the girl is like, yeah, like, so, like, it's been raining a lot, right? Like, how long has it been raining for? Like, oh, for the last, like, half an hour. So, like, shouldn't this girl have had first red flag just be like, the weather is just crapping out just for her? Because she knew she was, or the weather, like, Mother Nature was just like, dude, like, I'm sending you a signal to just, like, get out of this place. And you're just not taking it. But so, Susie then, after this whatever long cab ride, she makes it to this school, and this girl gets out of the school, and her name is Pat. We'll find out in this movie that she ended up getting kicked out of the school, deservingly so, but also, like, I think she's like, dude, I gotta freaking get out of here, because something's going on. Like, I am just national treasuring this mother and finding out all kinds of Nicolas Cage-like clues that I am just Scooby-Dooing through this, and I am just realizing that something's up. So, Susie is going on and hearing Pat mutter some garbage about a secret iris or a secret flower. Okay, like, you go in Victoria's Secret, whatever flower that you just need to do that day. Okay, all right. Like, what a weirdo. So, Susie is to not even tell Pat, like, hey, could you hold this door so I can go through into this school and be able to talk to whoever so I can get enrolled into this mother right here tonight? Because people are expecting me to be here. But so Pat closes the door, and so now Susie is then forced to ding dong and talk to this speakerphone like thing. And Susie is talking to this speaker person, and they don't go on and ask her, would you like fries with that? Instead, they're going on, and for every time Susie is to talk, like, well, yeah, like, I'm Susie, I'm expected here, and this and that. And, like, no, we don't know any Susie here. Like, go away. And Susie's like, well, I'm expected. Like, I'm from this girl from New York. I'm coming here to go to your school. And they're like, no, go away. Bye-bye. And Susie is just like, well, okay, I guess I'm just forced to just get back to this cab and just, like, come back the following morning. So, all the while, like, Pat, I guess, didn't realize that there was actually a cab driver there, that she could have gone on into this cab, and, like, instead, like, Pat is just running through this forest. I'm like, why? So, Susie gets in this cab, drives off, and Pat is now running to this this, I want to say, like, apartment complex of some kind, and I'm assessing or assuming that this is either some kind of relative or to have been some kind of roomie or friend of hers that she had kind of bunked with prior. So she goes in this elevator, and so she gets to this room, and so Pat ends up stating that because this is Pat here, Susie had gone on and like she is kind of doing her own story that we don't see. Pat is the one running to this uh, apartment complex to meet with this girl, and so Pat is talking to this girl and saying like, "Well, hey, yeah, like I'm happy enough to just have the couch," and the girl's like, "Yeah, you can stay here as long as you like," and Pat is like, "Oh no, it's not that," and the girl's like, "You know what? I don't care that you were kicked out of school. Like, so what if you were thrown out of school, deservingly so for what you had gone on and done?" So the girl's like, "Yeah, like it's not about that. Like, I just want to like get out of here like as soon as possible, ASAP. Cause yeah, like I want no freaking like karma or freaking bad luck of the draw coming my way. But sadly enough, she's gonna be getting some karma coming at her. So we have Pat that goes into this room, and the window just opens, and like the wind is just flickering up. And so the other girl comes in the room, and she's like, "Pat, what's wrong with you? Like it's just the wind. Like just kind of close the window." Like we have Pat who's just like, "Yeah, I don't want anything to do with that window." And it's like, "Come on, just close the window, common sense." But so this girl looks at Pat and it's like, "Why are you just so like afraid of everything? Like it feels like there's something you're just not telling me here." So Pat goes on and just starts to look into things, and she then goes into this one window and starts looking out on it, and all of a sudden Pat takes this lamp and is looking further into the window, and all of a sudden there's to be some green glowing eyes, and the window breaks and something's grabbing her and smushing her in to the window, and Pat's friend is going on and like just knocking on this door like, "Let me in, Pat, let me in." And there's some smushing going on. So the girl goes on and runs off to other neighbors and is like, "Help, help, there's a murder, there's something going on here." So Pat, she goes on to start to just get stabbed by a guy consistently. Like, this girl is at this certain other whole entire place than where she was, and she's just consistently just getting stabbed by this person. And so this leads her to then be like laying down against this glass, this multicolored glass like thing, and again still getting stabbed away, stabbed in the heart. And so like, okay. And so Pat ends up putting her head back and breaks a bit of the glass. And so this girl's friend is to rush down, trying to go on and call out for anybody. possibly going on and maybe even leaving this place to maybe go and get to the authorities. And so here is where Pat ends up having this rope being attached to her, and she breaks through the glass, and then she ends up getting noosed and hung. And as pieces of not only this glass, but just like the stuff that this is all attached to ends up falling, it ends up falling on Pat's friend and killing her, which I'm like, man, that is just some horrible karma. But then also, like, there's some witchcraft going on here. So, like, really, like, that was not a just coincidence or just, like, that was some planned accident shit going on where this girl gets a freaking glass to the head and freaking just pieces just lobbed in her, killing her. So, follow up the next day, this blind guy named Daniel, who, man, that guy really has to get a new dog. Yeah. Uh, like, this dog, oh my god, what it ends up doing in this film, or what we end up hearing to have done in this movie, I'm like, wow, okay, like, you have made a bad choice in dog ownership, buddy. But that's you. That's on you. So, and it's not like he could have. Nah, I probably shouldn't have made that joke. Anyways, let's move on. So, Daniel makes his way into this school, and Tanner ends up telling him, "Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, good morning." So, Susie makes her way into the school, and she's met by Tanner. It's like, "Oh, can I help you?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm Susie." And Tanner ends up saying, like, "Well, no, we were kind of expecting you like yesterday evening, like, and you told us that ahead of time." And Susie is just like, "Yeah, about that. Like, I did arrive at like 10 o'clock last night, but like I just couldn't get in." So she's like, "Oh well, you're here now. Like, welcome to the academy. I'm Miss Tanner. I'll be one of your instructors." So the first thing that Tanner ends up showing to her is a woman called Madame Blanc. And Madame Blanc is to be like a vice uh, directress, but you're probably at some going at bleh, you're probably at some point going to hear the word directress kind of later on here. Like most of the time, they just call her Madame Blanc. So Madame Blanc is to be talking to these police officers. And at some point, the police officers are talking about, like, well, yeah, like, because, like, they end up having to say, it's like, well, yeah, like, it seems that one of the students was murdered. And, okay, so, uh, they end up going on and asking about, like, well, yeah, like, uh, does anybody know anything about a girl being here at 11 o'clock? And Susie chimes in and is like, well, yeah, like I saw some girl here, and she starts describing her, and they're like, oh, yeah, like that's the girl who died. So, uh, like it didn't really seem that she was dead at that time. So it's like, okay, like she knew about her leaving this school. So, yeah, so like it was a whole thing about that. So, after the police went on and left, uh, Mistress Blanc is to go on and talk to Susie and just be like, oh yeah, like if anything, like those were policemen. If of course, we had to kind of draw those conclusions because a policeman would probably have to go on to wear a suit that says policeman on it. But these guys must be just detectives. We have to just naturally assume here because they're just wearing suits and ties. So Madame Blanca is a state that Susie's last name is to be very familiar to her, and a woman called uh, Banyan years ago in New York, was to have been called Carol. And Susie ends up saying, it's like, oh yeah, like, she's my aunt. It's like, oh good, she's a marvelous woman, and that kind of tells me, like, your relative lineage of, like, if that girl is good, maybe you are too. So, and also that she was a friend and benefactor of artists everywhere. Whoopie doopie. So they go on and they talk about how somebody is to be traveling abroad, and I believe that that is to have been the main, um, like Madam Woman, the main, uh, what's the word, uh, directress, and they end up saying that Pat was to have been expelled yesterday for improper conduct. Why they had to go on and say that because the girl is freaking out of there and dead anyways, it doesn't really matter. But I guess to like give Susie like, well, hey, like we're gonna put the foot down and like if anything with you like seems sus, like then like we're gonna be very strict and very disciplined here. So they also say that she was like murdered by a madman. It's like, what if it was a mad woman? You don't know. Uh, and also, uh, they tell her that because she's a third year student, uh, that they found her a place to live in town. Uh, but unfortunately, it'll cost her $50 American a week because they haven't exactly figured out a room for her in this school right here now. I'm like, wait a minute, like you just had a student who just left and you have no room in this school? Like, what's up with that? Um, but then again, maybe that girl could have just gone on and also like lived away from school also. But then bizarrely, like it seemed that like they tell Susie it's like, well, yeah, you're gonna go on and have to like board with this one person, but then they just turn right around and say like, hey, we have a room for you. I don't know, like just something just seemed just so weird about all of that. So Blanc ends up going on and telling Susie, it's like, well, you know what, I kind of told you the usual stick that I go on and have to tell everybody. So I'm just gonna hand you over to Tanner over here, and like she's obviously one of the veteran teachers, so like yeah, I'll just have her go on and tell you what you need to know here. So Tanner goes on and tells Susie that the courses usually last 3 years, and there is to be a exam by the end of each year. More than likely, going on and probably having to have a note of this somewhere in here to realize that. So they go on and they also tell her that they won't teach her dance here because they already naturally assume that she is to have a well-rounded background in it. So, um, so if anything, they're just kind of establishing like her specialty and where she's going to be best at. So they also turn to a guy named uh, Pavlos, and Tanner ends up immediately putting this guy down and saying like, "Oh, he can't really understand me because he's Romanian." And like Tanner goes on to explain that this guy had to go on and get false teeth because he had horrible gingivitis and then yanked all of his teeth out. And so like the guy like it doesn't seem like he understood it, but just kind of the way that he was like looking at that woman, like I'd be like, dude, he probably freaking understands you. Like he's probably just saying that he's not understanding him. But uh Pavlos is also a handyman of sorts, so he's probably gonna be really handy at some point in this film with probably figuring out a way to just murder people. Anyways, moving on. So we have Tanner that is telling Susie here, it's like, well, hey, like, how about we go on into the locker room so you can go on and meet the other barrage of cast in this film. So immediately when they head their way into the locker room, there seems to be one girl who is to be stating, it's like, well, hey, Miss Tanner, like, I have to tell you something. And they're like, oh, hey, Polly Parrot. And she's like, what? So yeah, like a bunch of just garbagey things going on here. So the kind of the usual like just childish antics of an otherwise like roster of characters having fun with one another. So Tanner is just like, you know what, I gotta introduce you to Susie here, your new student. Uh, that if Susie is to go on and think that she's gonna be the only American in this roster, she would be wrong. So any number of these people, like she has to go and try to find anyone who has an extra pair of shoes because Susie won't actually have them today. But bizarrely, also when Susie goes and questions one of these people with shoes, like the girl is like, "Well, hey, I'll give you these shoes for like $50," but then Susie's just like, "Well, like I also have like a pair of shoes like within my suitcases, so like I don't really need your shoes." So the girl is just like, "Oh well," so but she's still gonna use those shoes. She still will. So like she's renting them, but like it doesn't really seem that I ever see like a handoff or exchange of cash or whatever. So I don't know what's going on there. So Tanner ends up also stating to the ladies that's like, hey, kind of gather up your because you're gonna be meeting me in the red room. So because we just have color palettes and all these kind of visual things. So we would have Susie that goes on to meet up with Olga, and Olga's like, "Hey, like I'm Olga, and I'm going to be your tenant." And she tells her, "It's like, well, yeah, like I usually pay Americans like $50 a week, and I need that $50 right away." And so Susie is just like, "Okay, all right, well, okay." So here's where Susie ends up asking for the shoes, and then and when she gets the shoes, she ends up going on and sitting next to this girl named Sarah, who they end up becoming fast friends. and she knocks over her purse with all of these things, and there ends up being this one lighter in there. So Sarah ends up talking to Susie here, and it's like, well, hey, did you get the shakedown for people going on and asking you about money? And Susie's like, oh yeah, like definitely. I've already gotten like so many people just trying to figure out ways to just bargain uh, their way into my wallet. So Olga ends up coming back and is like, oh hey, like Sarah and Susie. Like, you know what? Like with girls that starts with S's, like I am gonna go on and say that like the both of you are just snakes. And so both of them end up like putting their faces to one another and just being like, so after that, we then uh, transition to uh, Olga and Susie at their apartment. It seems that Olga is going on and answering phone calls and all kinds of things, while Susie, I believe, is getting certain luggages from a guy named Mark, I believe, or whoever this just cute guy is that Olga states is to be just kind of forced to be left at the school and do all these errands, like 101 like errands or whatever. But anyways, we'll get to that when we get to that. So Olga ends up talking about getting certain kind of offers and this or that, and uh, but Olga is also just kind of very unsure about what exactly she'll do. So Susie ends up telling Olga that her room is very pretty, and Susie is just like, well, yeah, like for or no, so Susie ends up saying to Olga, it's like, well, hey, like, are you willing to put up with a snake? And Olga's like, don't tell me like you're as like touchy as Sarah is. And Susie's like, oh, I don't know, just kind of making jokes, making fun. So Olga ends up taking a phone call. So this long-haired guy ends up dropping all his stuff. So Susie ends up talking to this guy, and this guy ends up like stating like, well, yeah, like I really had to drop all this stuff off and just kind of get back to the school because I have to kind of make it back in lunch in just kind of like half an hour because I live at the school. And so Susie ends up like just kind of thinking the guy and then talking to Olga. And so she takes the phone and she pulls it away and she's like, well, like that guy is cute, and it seems that he never has enough money for a room um, and board for school, and so he ends up doing like all these tasks for Tanner, and like she's got him under his or under her thumb, and that's when the tons of 101,000 errands or whatever he always goes on and does. So also stating like relating this to the dead girl from the very beginning of this film. Like poor Pat, she really liked him, but she's dead now. And Susie ends up talking to Olga like, well, yeah, like or no, Olga ends up talking to Susie, and so Olga says like, well, yeah, like it seems like you saw Pat last night, and And Susie was like, yeah, like she was mumbling some kind of nonsense. And so she's like, secret, and then she's like, Iris, and then she's like, what does this mean? And so Susie ends up saying that, like, well, yeah, like, Pat was talking about some secret flower. Like, does that mean anything? And Olga ends up saying, like, well, like, regardless of that nonsense, regardless of whatever that jazz was, Olga is like, well, yeah, like, she felt terrible about them kicking her out, but she actually also just really deserved what she did. And they don't ever really say ex- like exactly what she'd ever gone in and done. But anyways, so now back at class, Sarah goes on and meets up with Susie. It's like, hey, how'd you like that Olga? And and Susie's like, oh, it was nice. So Tanner ends up coming in, and this is where we have to get some notes in here. And Tanner is just like, okay, you 8 in the morning people, come with me to the yellow room. And we have again Madame Blanc making her way to just kind of good morning people. And Madame Blanc is going on and making her way to Susie to just go on and tell her, like, oh, yeah, like, uh, I've got some news for you. Like, it seems that we do have a room here available for you, and if that's okay. And because I know that you are staying with Olga, and like, but like in your letter of enrollment, like it does state that you do get room and board. And Susie ends up saying, like, well, yeah, like living here would be convenient and all, but I'd rather want to go on and live with Olga. And Blanc is just like, well, yeah, but like living here would be free. And Susie's like, yeah, no. So uh Madame Blanc is like, okay, like as you wish, like, all right. So Tanner ends up kind of hearing this conversation, and that's when Tanner hits Susie with like, man, you are so strong-willed, like I'm really impressed. So and this and that, just kind of hitting her with this, and I was like, all right, yeah, like so strong-willed that she's gonna be the final girl of this movie and just freaking bang all the way through here, just banging it out, bang, bang, bang. Anyways, so here's when Susie again bumps into that one guy, and so as she starts to make her way to this yellow room, she all of a sudden is starting to go through this hallway where all of a sudden there's this just odd item that is just kind of flashing this light of some kind. And so here's where Susie does the whole like ugh thing, as she's just kind of like, man, my brain, what is this doing to me? And she's starting to feel sick. She's starting to feel queasy. Oh. So we then go into the yellow room, and more notes. Towards the end of the 19th century, the technique of classical ballet uh, assumed a different, more stylish postation. Uh, improvisation? I don't know. So, uh, Susie ends up going into the room, and like Sarah turns to Susie. It's like, hey, are you okay? Like you're looking a little white there, buddy. and I mean more white than you already are. And so Susie ends up telling Sarah, it's like, you know what, I'm a little weak, like I'm just kind of feel like I'm coming down with something. And so Tanner turns to Daniel, and it's like, all right, you can begin. So everybody just starts to go on and just kind of freestyle and just start kind of doing their own kind of things. And we have Tanner who's like, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, like kind of giving them all just kind of the like in band class, they would have like this kind of metronome kind of thing going on where they can kind of get the tempo, because all their dancing has to eventually go on and attach to music. So here's the thing though, like it's weird that Susie is to actually kind of be in the forefront instead of being behind everybody, because she's never been in this school before. So honestly, she should be behind everybody, just kind of looking at what they're doing and trying as much as possible to just kind of copy them. But instead, she's in the forefront and she's doing all of this stuff. I'm like, how does she know what's going on within this place that she's not quite familiar with? And if anything, probably should have someone could have gone on and stated like hey, like you should probably in your first stage just kind of like be in the back so you can kind of just watch everybody else and then just kind of do your own thing afterwards. But so Tanner ends up going to Susie, and so Tanner is like, okay, like hit me with your greatest hit, Susie. And Susie is just like, you know what, I'm a little weak, a little queasy. Can I just take a little? Can I just bow out? And Tanner is like, well, like hit me with your, like I want to see what, like I want to see what you can just bring. It's trial by fire, woman. Like you gotta give me something. Like give me something to just kind of like see how far along you are, just see how good you are, and hopefully I can just kind of be impressed by you. And so Susie tries as much as possible to do her best ballet moves and whatever, but you can tell that she is just like half assing this. And so like we're in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so Tanner is like, pay attention, get those legs higher, uh, like you're going limp. Come on, like hit me with some flavor. That's what I would have loved to have said. So, uh, get those legs up higher, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, again, pay attention. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, freaking Susie ends up taking a little dirt nap, and blood comes out of her mouth and her nose. Not just one, but both. Like she is just kind of in and out. So Madame Blanc is making her way into the room, and they're just like taking this pitcher and just pouring water into this woman. Just like, hey man, like let's definitely get her hydrated, or let's get her to just be like, what the like you guys are just like shoving water into me. This doesn't make sense. So they're like, drink up, and she's like, like you're gonna freaking like waterboard me and freaking kill me by accidental drowning. So we have this doctor coming in, and he is he Mr. Or Professor uh, Verdegast. So he's to go on and kind of like state that kind of what this girl is going through is just kind of nothing, and if anything, that she is to uh been out of practice about what she's doing. So if anything, like there's been certain tears and certain sprains and stuff that I guess can quickly go on with barely doing any kind of exercise, it seems. And so she is to have gone on and done some hemorrhaging because of all of this. And I'm just like, man, how out of practice is this girl? Like, maybe it was the flight. Who knows? Like, they can just bizarrely rationalize all this. So they had been injecting her with this needle, and he ends up telling her, it's like, oh, yeah, this will get you back on your feet. So, uh, they end up also telling her that she needs to consistently drink wine. I'm like, really? Just booze this girl up. Yeah, like, she's already getting queasy and whatever, and she's feeling ill. Like, yeah, let's just get her drink on also. So, so, Madame Blanc is going on and telling Susie that Olga had gone on and delivered her stuff to her bags and her things. And so, uh, Olga, it seemed, had also given back Susie her $50. And so the professor, the doctor guy, is telling everybody that uh, what Susie needs is just some rest right now. So, or otherwise, she's just gonna start hemorrhaging. Uh, and so, also, he states that she needs to eat bland foods and nothing that's fruit. So, Susie ends up again bumping into Sarah because, like, hey, we're neighbor buddies. Ah. So, uh, Sarah ends up stating, it's like, well, yeah, like, I guess you moved in? And Susie is like, well, yeah, like, Olga just dropped all my here. Like, she must have thought I was contagious or out and sick with something. I don't know. You would have thought that any number of these students would have also been like, well, yeah, like, bizarrely, we've kind of had a string of this going on. Or, like, maybe any number of these students could just be having these kind of just weird situations to have cropped up. No, it just seems that Susie is to just be the very first one to ever have weird things happen within this school, it seems. You would have thought that there would have been some kind of weird pattern emerging, but I don't know, maybe these students just haven't been here long enough to know any kind of other stories. But so, or more than likely, they're not even going on and telling Susie this because it's like, dude, like, you don't know what you got yourself into. And I'm going to eventually tell you that you're kind of not knowing what you're getting yourself into by, at some point, uh, to have told you that I was the one who told you to not go here. So, anyways, trying to think here. So, Pavlos ends up coming in, and Pavlos is kind of, as he drops this thing, he ends up looking at the slider. It's like, all right. And so Susie ends up telling Sarah, it's like, hey, you better be looking at that lighter because it seems that Pablo is also being looking at that lighter. So Sarah is also looking at Susie's food, and it's like why are you kind of eating this specific kind of meal? And Susie's like, well, they got me on some kind of absurd restricted diet. So it's like, okay, like I guess to just kind of get used to things. Like maybe she's having altitude problems or something, or like anybody that would just kind of fly to another country, there's certain kind of weird altitude or some kind of problems that arise. Because I know certain like athletic people would have to kind of fly over the world, and like there's certain just problems that arise with having kind of flown from place to place like that. So Sarah is to go on and tell Susie about the bell, and the bell is to go on and say that that supper is going to be served soon. So Sarah is going on into her room, and she all of a sudden is just kind of like kind of scratching and just kind of knocking some stuff off of her shoulder, and Susie is starting to just really just comb through her hair, and all of a sudden she's noticing some things in her hair that she's kind of pulling out. All of a sudden we come to find this maggot-like thing, and she's like, "Oh my god!" And she looks at her comb, and her comb is full with maggots. Oh my god! And so that all of a sudden has this whole entire floor with either people that are just kind of resting up and maggots on the face, or eventually everybody just freaking out, getting out of the rooms and just being like, ugh. And so that has Tanner and the chefs and the long haired Mark guy that ends up doing all the errands. So we have Tanner who's going out like, oh my god, like this is really disgusting. So Tanner is asking the chef, it's like, okay, like where is this affecting? And it's like everywhere, like the whole floor. So Tanner's like, okay, but like where is it coming from? Like it has to be coming from somewhere. And they're like, well, it's from the ceiling. And so Tanner ends up telling everybody who is to just kind of be on this floor to just kind of go downstairs, because they're gonna figure out an alternate place for them to sleep and kind of live temporarily. So Tanner and I believe the long haired fellow ends up making their way to uh, a upstairs floor above uh, where this other floor was to have been swarming with maggots. And they come to find it that there was to be this crate with supposedly a bunch of food. And supposedly, I guess that this food was to have gone on and been so expired that there was maggots crawling all over it. So, and Madame Blanc ends up going on to explain this. So, Madame Blanc ends up telling, like, well, I'm sorry, all you girls. I'm truly mortified about this situation. Please excuse the uh, the intrusion of maggots, basically. So, uh, they had gone on and ordered this food by mail. I guess they didn't use Amazon. And they thought that this was to be a reliable source, uh, and thought it was to have been honest about the food date, but they would go on and be wrong. And uh, and evidently the food was above this attic. So they said that they were going to go on and fumigate the place within the following morning to get rid of that whole problem. So they realized that they would then have to turn certain practice halls into dormitories temporarily to just kind of make amends for what's going on here. I had to kind of figure out the terminology for all that. So they also go on and they tell certain people, it's like, well, hey, like, if you decide to uh, go into other lodgings or other hotels or other places, by all means. But for here on out, like, you all can decide to sleep into this one hall room. And one of the girls ends up saying, like, well, yeah, like, this is really fun. It reminds me of camp. And so Man Blanc is like, oh, yeah, that's great that you think that. You're going to die. You're going to die, little girl. No. Uh, but so they end up also asking in school, like, well, hey, like, are all the other teachers going to sleep here as well? And Madame Blanc was like, well, yeah, like, all the teachers are also going to sleep here. If anything, I think they're gonna kind of sleep outside of where all these sheets are just kind of cropped up. So Sarah and Susie are talking to one another, and she's saying that uh, that weirdly there is a schedule at 9:30 for everybody to go on and leave like clockwork. So, like, I guess that, like, is to be, I guess, the time where everybody eventually goes on to bed is right around that time. So Mark is going on waving at Susie, and the girls are just kind of gushing. Is like, oh, like, is that hot guy that is after you, Susie? And they end up saying to go, hey, uh, like, yeah, I'm not much of gossip, but hey, like, hey, if it works out, it works out. So Susie ends up telling Sarah, it's like, like, let's drop it, like, let's forget it. So they end up going on to sleep, and so Sarah ends up waking up in the middle of the night, and she ends up hearing this person make their way to this bed, and she ends up hearing this unusual snoring. And Sarah has to go out of her way to wake up Susie and just be uh, like, hey, like, were you sleeping? It's like, oh no, like, I was just counting Catwoman. I was just counting sheep. So it's like, hey, what's what? So Sarah ends up telling Susie, it's like, hey, you hear that snoring? And Susie's like, well, yeah, like, I would have loved to have been able to do that, but you're just bothering me right now. That's what she should have just said. So the whole thing of it is supposedly the directress was to have been studying abroad. She wasn't to have been here at all, and they lied to them. And the director is actually, or the directress is actually in this building, and Sarah knows that uh, because Sarah had lived in one of the guest rooms, and also uh, one night, uh, she would go on to come to find it that there was to be a person going into the room next to hers that ended up snoring like that. I was like, I had to try to get the thing here perfect here. So because not only is this person snoring, but there's like a whistling to the snoring. So eventually, I think when Sarah ends up asking Madame Blanc about it, Madame Blanc ends up confessing, like, well, yeah, like the directress was technically here for a few hours, and they're like, well, yeah, like she's definitely here, like she's right behind that sheet. So the following day, we have Daniel come in again with his dog, and this time around, there is a problem with this dog being present here. So we have Madame Blanc who's talking to these men about the fumigation and them taking care of it promptly. So again, Daniel is to be good morning, Blanca or Blanc, good morning, because Daniel just kind of comes in and just consistently good mornings everybody, and someone always has to say good morning to him. So we have Sarah that goes on and talks to Tanner about like, well, hey, like, was the directress here last night? And Miss Tanner is like, oh no, like she wasn't. So again, for some reason, like they never want anybody to know that the directress is here. I don't know why that is. Like I guess because they're putting up a ruse that she's never really here, but then when she actually is really there, they try to just skirt around it. So they go on and say it's like, well, yeah, she's away from a trip, but maybe she'll be back soon. So and then Tanner just kind of skirts away to figure out where someone is going. So supposedly this girl is a second year and she's going into the red room. Again, notes. So we have the chef and we have this little boy, and they're making their way to this school, and the dog is looking at the two of them and just like, there's something wrong with these two people. So we then have Tanner who's rushing into this room, and she's like, stop what you're doing, stop everything. Daniel, stop playing. So enough. So Tanner turns to Daniel and is like, you know what happened, Daniel? And Tanner ends up telling Daniel that his dog ended up biting a little boy called Albert. He ended up biting into his arm and took a chunk out of his arm. And like that vicious dog had mutilated this child. So Madame Blanc went on to take this kid to the hospital, and now this kid is getting stitches because chunk out of arm, we'd have to naturally assume. So we go on and have Daniel that's just like, you know what, I don't believe that for 1 minute. And Daniel's like, well, hey, yeah, like how about you just go to the hospital yourself? Like just see if uh if this kid has lost a chunk of his arm. So, and just kind of hear that child crying because you can't freaking see it, because you can't see the blood. So Daniel goes on and says that his dog is peaceful and is a faithful animal, uh, and never meant to hurt anybody. So, and if anything, even Daniel is kind of accusing the boy of doing something. So it gets to the point here to where this escalates so much so that Tanner does not want that dog anywhere near the school ever again, and he should have actually been put to death. To where, of course, Daniel is to just be just so much debating about this dog that he is even willing himself to go along with the dog. Just like, you know what? Like, I think there's nothing wrong with my dog. Like, I think that I'm just going to take the side of my dog and freaking get out of here as well. So, Daniel ends up going on and he ends up saying that he leaves here. Tanner ends up chucking his cane. Daniel ends up going on and just kind of walking around and then finds his cane, picks it up, and then puts on his blazer. And so he's like, well, hey, like, with the way that Tanner is yelling at Daniel, Daniel is like, well, hey, like, you know what? Like, I may be blind, but I'm definitely not deaf. Like, I can hear you. But so Tanner is going on to like, get out, get out, get out of here. So back with Susie. Susie is going on and looking at Pavlos, and she's like, you know what, like, how long do I still have to like have some that cup of drink, that cup of wine, and like how long am I really gonna have to eat this kind of diet? Because yeah, like at some point when you go on and you eat certain kind of foods, like especially if it's the same thing every day, like it eventually starts to get really boring. But then also like you start craving things, but then you're also just like, ugh, like this food is just like this food is just garbage. So both Susie and Sarah are going on, and it's 9:30, and the two of them are talking, and they here's where they start to realize that like people it seems are just kind of walking, and they're not walking to an exit, they're just kind of consistently just starting to walk. So Sarah is going on and like notching on a piece of paper like how many steps that they're doing to try and figure out where to like say that they're going to head. So because the whole question is if they don't leave, like where do they go in this school? And so they're also questioning, it's like, well, hey, like why didn't we notice this ever until tonight? Or till Sarah mentions it. So also like Sarah like is further like trying to keep Susie awake, and Susie's just like dog freaking tired. And This will be foreshadowing for every time that Sarah is going to try and keep Susie awake. Susie, like, uncontrollably just falls asleep. So we then transition to then Daniel. Daniel is bizarrely going on and seeing some kind of polka slash uh, just Swedish looking dance thing. And uh, so Daniel is going on and hearing the music because he can't do anything else. So that sounded horrible. Daniel is going on and kind of at this place where there is dancing and singing going on, and he's enjoying it with his dog and probably having quite a bit of beer and whatever. So we have this girl go on and assist Daniel to leave this place. And so he's now walking with his dog through these stoplights and to this one area where all of a sudden this dog ends up stopping him. So Daniel telling the dog, like, hey, let's go on, let's go home. And the dog is just kind of just there and he's consistently barking. So Daniel's like, hey, what's going on? Like, and so Daniel just kind of assumes that somebody must be here, and like the dog is consistently going more and more wild. So at this point now we're getting to the kind of the darkest part of this film where some people may be going like, oh no, F this, I get it. But I have to just kind of state what's going on in this movie anyways. So Daniel is going on and asking like who are you, where are you, what are you, kind of thing. So the dog ends up finally, like, after just barking and becoming more and more just aggressive, the dog goes on and attacks Daniel himself and is to grab onto Daniel's neck and starts just biting away into the point of this dog just killing Daniel and starts ripping off his flesh. To have these two police officers in uniform running to where Daniel is uh, to then all of a sudden have a bunch of the students to have quickly heard about Daniel. And so if they had gone on and at some point like said poor Pat, they're now going on and saying, oh, poor Daniel, torn to pieces. So they realized now that you could never really put too much trust in an animal like that. I think they ended up calling him a wolfhound, which bizarrely stuck out to me. So we also had this girl because notes talking about that she was to have uh, two of them at once in this villa in uh, Gestred. So they go on and they recount the deaths that have occurred upon this film. And so they end up saying it's like, okay, like now we've had like Pat, she was murdered by some madmen, as Madame Blanc had gone on and stated. Now Daniel is to have gotten killed by this dog. That's two deaths that are now connected to this place. And Susie should just be like, dude, I'm freaking out of here. And so they're like, hey, like, is something like wrong about this place? Is there some just bad juju here? Is there just some bad karma in here? Like, should we go on and just like try to figure out a way to get this like place? Should we like send somebody to just kind of figure out like an exorcist or something? Should we? to just try to purge this place of evil. So, like, somebody may have gone on and put something on this place, like some kind of, um, like just kind of bad sign, some kind of hex bag of some kind. Like, somebody could have put something here. So, we have Susie that goes on and is talking to Madame Blanc here, and it seems like she's taking a long time to get to her point. As Madame Blanc is like, okay, like, why are you here? Like, something wrong? Uh, like, just kind of just like, hey, tell me what's going on here. And Susie is like, oh no, 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 like everything's fine. And so it's like, then why are you here? And so Tanner ends up barging in, and so it's like, hey Tanner, you're just gonna just take a knee here. You're just gonna just back away. So Susie ends up going on and talking to Madame Blanc here, like, well, hey, yeah, like I want to just kind of talk to you about the events that have just been has just been transpiring lately, and so Madame Blanc is saying like, well, yeah, like I know there has been some string of deaths here, and as we all know, and so Susie ends up going on and asking Madame Blanc here. It's like, well, like, hey, like with all the kind of connections with like murders and deaths just kind of happening, like, is there anything of anybody coming to a real clear consensus about who had killed like Pat? Because she had obviously gotten murdered, and maybe like these like things are all kind of connected with Daniel and then Pat. Like maybe like there's going to be more to come. So that there could maybe some. So really, like, Susie ends up stating about how like Pat had gone on to mention about the secret Iris. And so she ends up going on and telling Madame Blanc about this. It's like, well, does that mean anything to you? Like, could that be anything that we should probably tell the police of? And uh, and so Madame Blanc is like, oh wow, like yeah, like, and you only had to kind of wait a couple of days to go on and tell me this. So we have Madame Blanc that turns around and calls the police and tells the police about this to maybe put Susie a little bit more at ease. So both Sarah and Susie are going on into the pool to maybe just kind of relax a bit. And Sarah is going on and having some suspicions that maybe Pat had gone on to find something out that she shouldn't, and someone had gone on and intervened and killed her for it. And it could have been one of the teachers. So, or maybe just somebody hunting for something here. So, Sarah ends up stating that she was Pat's friend because notes. And uh, And like Sarah also states that it's just kind of weird that uh that Pat dying and then this girl kind of showing up. Like there's a lot of weird coincidences like just kind of happening, and also it seemed that uh Susie was having a bit of dialogue, it seemed, with Pat without her really knowing. So Sarah is also going on and stating that Pat like had gone on and tried to get kicked out of school because she was getting really scared and she was like, dude, I'm freaking out of here. So like she was almost at a point of hysterics. And then right after that, like she coincidentally she got killed. So and here's where Sarah reveals that the person who was going on and trying to get Susan out of the building was to have been Sarah all along, who was telling her, it's like, no, 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 like, I don't know anything about you being here, go away, go away. That was Sarah. Sarah was to disguise her voice to go on and tell Susie to try to get rid of her, but she stuck it out. So also like Sarah had gone on to find out that Pat was holding on to some notes. And so Sarah is to want to go on and need to find those notes and give them to Sarah so she can read them. And so because Pat had it seemed to be taking notes for a very long time about things about this place. So Sarah is to go on and tell Susie, it's like, well, hey, like if anything, I'll get those notes and I'll give them to you later so you can read them. So Susie, now in her bed, conveniently, to then have Sarah, who's like, hey, Susie, wake up. Like, yeah, those notes that I told you about, most of them are all gone. And it seemed that Sarah was to only have that one thing of notes. And so Sarah comes to find out that this is some note about witches. And so, like, so Sarah's asking Susie, like, well, hey, like, do you know anything about witches? And so all of a sudden, like, Sarah is trying to shake Susie. Susie is in such a deep sleep. Sarah's just like, oh, like, I think something's gonna happen here. So Sarah goes on to realize that her room is to all of a sudden have its light come on. And so that freaks Sarah out. She's like, okay, like somebody's coming for me. And so, like, I need to get the heck out of here. And so Sarah decides that she's going to make it out of this hallway and she's just going to run anywhere. And, like, I think supposing the background, there's a weird thing of a person that, or somebody that's just telling her to wait. Where that's coming from, I have no clue. That can go on, maybe be the witch who's just kind of behind the curtain here. If you remember Wizard of Oz, like the behind the curtain guy, like I think that may be the witch trying to like magically just persuade this person to be like, no, 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 don't do what you're doing here. So we also have the killer that is making its way as Sarah, it seems, is trying to escape and go into all of these areas. So the killer is going on to make his way to this bathroom to get this razor blade, this really long, old-fashioned razor blade, where he's gonna go on and swipe and murder this girl. So Sarah ends up going into that attic that had that food stuff that had gotten spoiled before. So Sarah goes in this attic, and it seems that she's realizing something's coming after her. So she then goes into this other door and she locks it behind her. And oh, wait. Also, there's a whole nother thing. So before going into this door that she locks, she ends up bashing into this glass. She goes from one thing of glass to the other, and then she ends up going on into this door and she locks it. And so she's now all scarred and she's all freaking hurt and everything. And she all of a sudden notices that the lock, like, it's starting to get picked because this razor is coming in and it's pushing to try and get this thing unlocked. And so now, like, Sarah realizes that she's basically effed here, and she's just kind of waiting for this door to get unlocked. So Sarah is now going on and pushing all of these boxes, and the very box in the very bottom ends up starting to crumble and break. And so she's stacking all these things into this window, and she's trying to make it her way into this window to then go into this other set of room with all these kind of like just weird and the very wall, I think it's just kind of like odd shaped tools. I don't know exactly they are, but they just really stuck out at me as like, okay, like, is that lawn tools or what is this? But also, like, here's where she falls into this room that has all of this, like, I'm assuming, like, either piano wire or some kind of wire of some kind. Because, like, you probably could have assessed that this is maybe some room with maybe, like, barbed wire, but there's no barb. So, like, this girl is in an entire room with all of just this wire, and so she's trying to get through here. And that's where the killer ends up coming in, grabbing her by the face and slicing her neck and killing her. So Tanner ends up meeting up with Susie, and Tanner ends up bringing up to Susie, it's like, well, hey, like, it seems that Sarah, like, she disappeared. And Susie ends up telling Tanner, like, wait a minute, like, I just talked to her last night. Like, I don't remember exactly what the conversation was because I was just kind of in and out of it, but I talked to her last night. She couldn't have not have just disappeared. So they go on and say to, like, well, yeah, like, she left this morning. She didn't tell anybody about she was leaving. So, but weirdly enough, like, all of her bags are gone, and uh she supposedly had gone on and left at 6 a.m. this morning. It's like, okay, how would you go on and know that? So, without anybody, like, having to have been told that she left. Doesn't make any sense. So, they also state that there is evidence of a car driving off. But again, without anybody being told. Uh, so they had to naturally assume that that was some just cab driver. Weirdly, like Susie is like, okay, wait a minute, like this girl, like, yeah, like there was maybe some like suspicious like things that she like had some problems with, but like it didn't really seem that this girl like was like evident having any real evidence that she was really unhappy, and like, and even if so, like she could have told her friend Susie, like, if anything, Sarah was going on and telling Susie that, like, hey man, like, I'm going to give you certain piece of paperwork. So like this doesn't make sense. So let's reiterate here. So we have Sarah who had gone on and told Susie the night before. It's like, hey man, like, yeah, like Pat has all these notes. I'm gonna go on and give you these notes tonight. And Susie, it seemed, was just kind of so tired that she didn't even really get to read much of the notes. So you would have thought, like, as Sarah being a friend of Susie, that Sarah would have just been like, okay, well, I'm going to wait at this school until Susie wakes the next day and hand her these notes myself because I'm going to be the only one to be trusted to give her these notes. So, yeah, like, so much about this of her just disappearing and her just getting a cab and driving off, like, none of that just seems logical in my brain, to not have Susie be firing off with, like, dude, like, there is no way, like, Sarah should have been the nice friend to have, like, waited to just let me get all these notes and read them. So, like, why is she, like, just, or why is Sarah going on and be written off as just some like just shady thief? So also, I'd completely forgotten about this. So notes. Sarah had gone on to talk to Susie, I think while they were swimming, and had talked about Pat going on and having a lot of notes and giving them to a guy named Frank Mandel. Doesn't exactly say who this guy is at first, but Susie, when going on and talking to this guy, she'll find out that he's a therapist. So that ends up having Susie needing to call up this guy and getting a conversation with him, because it's like, well, hey, like, if I can't talk to Sarah because she's disappeared, then I'll talk to this therapist guy to hope that I can get answers from him. So when she goes on to then talk to this guy, she tells him about how like Sarah had just kind of just bizarrely left, and they had said that she disappeared and all of her luggage is gone, and we have the therapist that's like, okay, like, I'm at this convention center because I think Sarah also had said that before ahead of time, and so Sarah's like, okay, well, like, let's go there and I'll meet with you. So let me pause here for 1 second. Oh my god. Like, I think this movie is like, what, like an hour and a half? Like, God, why do these reviews take so long? God dang it. Huh. Like, I'm sorry. Like, more than likely, no one would ever want to go on and watch these kind of reviews. Like, I get it, but god dang it. Like, so I don't mean to make these just so stretched out and long. Like, it's really not, but god. So, Madame Blanc ends up turning to Tanner, and it feels that she holds some responsibility for all of her students there. So, Madame Blanc is talking about Sarah and is stating that the girl just kind of disappeared, and she ends up saying it's like, well, maybe I'll go on and I'll call her father, who's in Geneva, and perhaps like that's where she had gone. But she probably knows where this girl has gone to. Like, I think she's just kind of saying this to just kind of save face because there's probably a number of students that might kind of hear her talk about all of this. So like she's trying to just swerve favor here. So going on to this convention, so both the Frank and Susie meet together. So Frank ends up telling Susie that he had gone on to already call Sarah's father, and supposedly like the place that Frank called, they had said that Sarah's father had gone on to be gone for the next couple of days. So it's like, okay, this is just kind of oddly placed that uh, that this dad should have been in town when kind of receiving his daughter. So yeah, like a lot of this just kind of sounds weird. But then they also kind of rationalize that there's a possibility that maybe Sarah had gotten to her father and then they just kind of left themselves, but like still a lot of that just doesn't sound right. So if anything, the so Frank is going on and possibly thinking that they should probably just kind of wait to the father returns, and anyway, blah, blah, blah. But if anything, also like the therapist is to know Sarah uh quite well, and supposedly had her as a patient for 3 years going. And also, like, here's where we get to the point where the therapist has to break down that he is actually a therapist, Frank. So, supposedly, the whole story of the reason why Sarah was to have gone on and seeked out this therapist is because of her mother's death. Um, and I guess maybe both Sarah and her father had gone on to seek treatment for this. So, once Sarah was to just be kind of done with this therapist because it seemed that she didn't really need him much anymore, they still were kind of just friends after this. So it seems that Pat ended up going on and just kind of putting wild ideas into Sarah's head. And also, like, because of all the notes that were given to him, that he ended up, or no, that I guess Pat or whoever had the notes ended up going on and discovering how the whole academy or the school was to have been put together. And this is from 1895 by a person named Helena Marcos, a Greek immigrant. And that supposedly the local people were to be determined as witches. Supposedly there were some suspicions on Susie, uh, but also like just kind of keep it rolling here. And supposedly early in the 19th century, the Marcos woman had been expelled from several European countries. Uh, Supposedly even going into like kind of Salem trials and having them go and like judge her. And supposedly this woman had wrote a number of books and and this and that. So she supposedly had gone on to be called the Black Queen, whatever that means, and she settled down here, and there was to be a number of just kind of suspicions and gossip to be had about this girl. So supposedly she came into a great deal of wealth, and she then put the school together because of that. So at some point they had gone on to realize to kind of make this a dance, but then also to make it kind of just a cult off to the side that no one is going to kind of make any real qualms about. So because they'll just think that it's just some dance school. So, but for some reason or another, like it just didn't seem that things were just going all that well. So at some point, like these people had gone on to start figuring out that uh, that the occult was happening within this dance school, and so eventually certain madams and certain people had gone on to get killed in a fire. So eventually Susie is starting to ask like just kind of the general questions to this therapist about like, well, hey, like what does it mean to be a witch? And the therapist is to go on and be like, well, hey, like I don't know much about witchcraft. Like I only know about mental illness. If anything, like I'll actually give you a other like professor that he'll go on and he'll like kind of like tour you on like what witchcraft really is because it's his specialty. So Professor Milios ends up coming over. So the professor ends up going on to be kind of more kind of put together for this subject of talk. So we then have the we have Frank going on and talking to this professor. Was like, well, hey, like this girl is to be a friend of mine, and she wants to talk about witches. And so it's like, oh, okay, all right. So because also Frank is to leave because he also has something going on. He has an appointment. So there, of course, is to be immediately having that Susie's to ask this guy. It's like, well, hey, do you believe in witches? And it's like, well, yeah, that's what I study. Like, it's the thing that I've kind of been doing for a very long time is just about witches and witchcraft. So, like, it's as important to me as just any normal appendage. So, really, all of this comes down to, like, okay, well, what do witches do? Like, how do they eat? How do they. A lot of this is just gibberish stuff that really um, is to just kind of be breaking down about uh, the arts of the occult and about eventually having tremendous power, this and that. Let's just kind of get past all this. So, let me pause her again. I was just kind of reiterating what either the therapist had gone on and already said, or really a lot of it was to also just kind of give us like just kind of general stuff about witches, and it's just kind of like a lot of just drawing on stuff that I can just kind of cut out here. So really the more important point is when he talks about how like when a coven is deprived of its leader and like it's kind of cutting off the head to a snake, and then the rest of the snake is just kind of useless. So going on and telling her lastly that magic is everywhere, and it's also just hard to recognize that like there is magic everywhere. So now going on, and Susie is taking her meal and flushing it down the toilet, and so we would go on to have Susie, who is leaving for the day, and so she turns to Mark, and so she asks Mark, it's like, well, hey, like, where is everybody? And Mark is like, oh yeah, like, Tanner had gone on to just kind of give everybody just kind of movie tickets because evidently, like, they were just kind of splurging, kind of about, just about kind of what was going on lately, and so it's like, okay, that just seems kind of weird. Like, nobody asked Susie about this whole ticket thing. So Susie ends up trying to call Frank, and so Susie ends up going on and reminding Frank who she is, and then also she's like, well, yeah, I still haven't heard anything from Sarah, and it seems like they're going on and getting the same kind of messages between both of them. It's like, well, yeah, we still haven't heard anything from her. Like, she's more than likely dead. So also Sarah is talking about certain things that she's starting to experience, like when she goes on and eats at night. So the electricity starts to completely go out, and Sarah had gone on to lose this phone call. So Sarah at this point is starting to just get so worried about things that she's starting to smoke, because also there's a bat that ends up flying into her bathroom, and like it's kind of uh attacking her hair, and eventually she somehow gets it on the floor. She tosses this towel and she beats it with this stool and murders it. You can see all the blood freaking coming from the towel. It's gross. So again, like, this is late at night, and after all this, Susie is starting to leave, or starting to realize, like, okay, wait a minute, like, like, yeah, like, it's late at night. It's probably around 9:30 because the teachers start walking around. And she's like, yeah, like they never leave the school at all. Like, why is it that they aren't leaving? Why aren't they exiting? So she wants to figure out now if she can kind of count the footsteps, if she can follow or figure out where these people are heading. Like, we're at home stretch here, baby. Like, we're almost done. So Sarah starts, or Sarah, Susie starts counting, and she's like, okay, I'm at 20 now. So she comes to find that she's right by these chefs. And the chefs eventually are to just kind of poke their way out and be like, okay, who's there? Who's there? And Susie makes it into this other room where she's like, okay, like the footsteps end here, like, and there's carpet, so like that's why it's so quiet here. So she's trying to figure out like how these people can go on and exit here because it doesn't really rationally make sense. So again, like the only real clue that Susie actually has is when Pat was going on and talking from before. And so Susie is going on and actually this time around trying to remember what Pat had gone on and told her. So supposedly she goes on and hears notes. The secret. I saw it from behind the door. Three irises. Turn the blue one. So Susie goes on and sees a mirror reflecting back on her these three flowers. So she goes on and turns the blue one of these flowers to open up to this first blue curtain thing that leads into these long stretches of hallways that have all these writing and flowers on them. It's just very lavish visual. So it seems that Pat, once we get to these hallways, it seems that she's just kind of having her back to the wall and then kind of facing, like, just kind of back or alternate, just like she's alternating. And, like, I don't know why she's doing this, like, weird, goofy thing with kind of, uh, like, having to adjust herself consistently. But I guess that's her weird, SWAT like maneuver, just like, hey, man, like, I'm trying to see if something's coming. So Susie ends up getting into a conversation with Madame Blanc and Tanner and a lot of just other people. Like the little boy is there, and so they end up saying that like the big thing here is they want the New Yorker. They want her gone, and they want her. They either say that she's vanished, that she should vanish, or that she must die. And by the end of this, uh, Madame Blanca ends up going on and is kind of pouring her drink out to Helena and telling her to give her power or give her strength. And but she doesn't pour it out. She pours it into her goblet, her hole, her mouth. And so now that she said Helena, I assume Helena is some kind of demon or a much more powerful witch. Maybe this witch had gotten possessed by a demon? I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm thinking that Helena is. That she's a person to be disguised as a demon, and her name is just Helena. So, since the people want to go on and get rid of Susie here, they then leave it to Lurch, the guy who would go on and consistently be giving Susie her food, uh, Pavlos, and have him go on and go after Susie. So Susie then goes on to find her friend Sarah, and this woman is having all kinds of problems here. There's a lot of nails going through this woman's body, and so we see that Lurch is to have this lighter and he flicks it on so he can be able to see. So Susie, thinking that Lurch is going to go on and get to her, Susie then goes on to get into this other room that has this unusual peacock and has a person that's in this bed. So Susie bumps into the peacock, which rolls all these balls onto the ground, and this awakens this person that's in this bed. So Helena is to be the directress is to be Helena, and so Helena is like, oh, I was expecting you, Susie, American girl. So we have Susie that's like, hey, I'm gonna kill you, and she's like, oh, are you gonna kill me, Helena? All right, well, like, give it your best shot, Bucko. So, uh, like, because it seems like there's like this just internal thing going on, probably where like Helena could probably read this girl's thoughts, like, hey, you want to kill me? You want to try for it? So hell is behind a door. Uh, the living dead is behind a door. Uh, meet your death now. And the door opens, and of course, it is to be that girl that we had just saw, and she's taking this nail and she's kind of hovering over her head. So, Susie, after that peacock had fell, Susie had grabbed this needle and she kind of has it to her hand. And that's when Helena assumes that that's when Helena assumes that Susie having this object in her hand, like, is there to try and kill her. And so when Susie is to kind of move this kind of curtain that is surrounding this girl's bed, she can't see the Helena there. She's like, okay, where did she go? But then all of a sudden, when Susie is kind of looking further and further, all of a sudden there's this like weird whitish shadow that appears, and so Susie is like, okay, well, I'll just kind of stab the white figure that appears, and she stabs into Helena's neck, and she forces it all the way through her neck, and so now Helena drops down on the ground. This thing is just in her neck, just kind of like an arrow through the head. So right after that, Susie is realizing that this school is starting to crackle and starting to crumble. As further Susie is to try and escape from this school, she's starting to see the walls start to just, like I said, just kind of crackle and start to just break apart. And Susie then looks on at the room that was filled with like Tanner and Madame Blanc uh, and everybody that was to go on and just kind of be in that room, and they are all basically dying now, and like blood is just kind of coming through their heads, and it looks freaking awful. So Susie tries to go on, and she's trying to escape through this place, and like doors are just kind of busting open, and like she is trying to go on and get through this place, but there's just kind of like electricity and all kinds of things just kind of going off while she's trying to escape. So she finally then goes on, and by the time that she's getting through these front doors, like the front doors just kind of bust open, and Susie goes on and she realizes that she's now out of that place, and like she realizes that it's again raining, and she's like, oh my god, the relief of like this all being over. And this school ends up catching on fire, and so the movie ends. So I'm gonna get out of here. I spent an extra effing almost hour talking about this film. I'm sorry. It's just like God, I don't know how to edit myself, and also I'm spending way too long on projects that probably don't deserve it. Uh, but I'm not good at this. I'm not good at this at all. Uh, or I probably shouldn't deserve to be good at this. So, with that said, like I'm just gonna keep doing this every day to hope that eventually I find some movie that I can be a better reviewer at, and hopefully you'll go on and want to watch one of those. So, subscribe if you had gone on and definitely heard every single goofy f like word that I had to say here. Uh, if you haven't, or if you haven't already subscribed, then thank God you're still freaking here. But other than that, like, don't leave a like. Just your view is good enough. It really is. And also, just thanks for listening and thanks for being here. Because who knows when is the next time I'm going to go on? Just have some absurd uh, movie that I take way too long to talk about. I'm gonna get out of here because I've already been talking for 2 hours and 20 minutes. Oh, why? Why? I could have done probably 2 reviews by now. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here because maybe I'll lose this footage and have to do this all over again. So goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.